Hey, EMPI Engineering here. Today we're talking about our new 36 horsepower style Doghouse fan shroud. This is the one with all the new goodies in it. I know you've been blowing up our comment section and ringing our phone lines, but it's here, so let's talk about it. From the front, this might look like any other fan shroud, but we redesigned these from the ground up to be the best possible 36 horsepower style fan shroud for you. So starting at the bottom, we extended the fins. So if your thermostat has disappeared or is rusty or is missing the regulator, you can still benefit from the air straightening properties. So let's move on to the inside of the shroud. I'm gonna pull this apart real quick. So you can see here, we redesigned all of the fins. This was to make sure that we have an even distribution of air to both sides and to make sure that there's no stale air pockets. We use CFD analysis as well as 3D printing fins and using our flow bench to make sure that this setup actually gave a benefit. You can also see we have a scoop here. This helps draw air to the oil cooler to help it function better. All right, moving back up to the face of the shroud, you can see we filled in all of the extra holes to make sure your cooling air doesn't come out and you have a nice clean finish. We followed up with some of our consumer input and we straightened the alternator holes out. Moving down to the bottom, this lower edge has been extended to help seal the fan shroud to the tin. So again, no cooling air escapes. You worked really hard for it. Let's make sure you use it. This bottom edge here has also been redesigned so that the shroud can fit nicely on OEM and aftermarket bubble top cases. And we didn't forget the alternator cooling slot in here, which indexes in your tin. Moving on to the back side of the shroud, you can see that again, we incorporated a nice velocity stack on. This helped draw more air into the shroud. We were inspired by the early Porsche 356A shrouds, so we wanted to implement something similar. We aimed to make the velocity stack as close to the shroud as possible to maximize the gap between your firewall and this inlet. Luckily, airflow drops off exponentially with distance, so you really only need the first 2 to 4 inches to get the most out of this. So when you're installing it, make sure your firewall is not too bashed or messed up to get the best result from this shroud. This Doghouse fan shroud will be a direct fit for your Bug, Bus, or Ghia project made after 1971, or it can fit your earlier motors too if you use the upright Type 3 oil cooler. All right, so now that we're done testing all of our shrouds, let's talk about what we found. In the last video, some of you wanted us to talk about how it compares to our existing aftermarket shrouds, so we'll throw some of those numbers in. Starting off with the airflow out of the shroud, so this is the total volume leaving the shroud going to your heads and to your cylinders. We saw a 23% increase over the current aftermarket shroud, a 7% increase over the original OEM Doghouse shroud, and a massive 38% increase if you're upgrading from the early style upright oil cooler fan shroud. So something that makes the Doghouse fan shroud special is that it moves the oil cooler to the outside of the fan shroud versus the early style shrouds. So what this does is the oil cooler is no longer preheating the air going to cylinder 3 and 4, and now gets its own stream of air. When comparing the new shroud to the old shrouds, we saw a 41% increase in the airflow going to the oil cooler over the aftermarket shrouds, and an insane 242% increase over the OEM shroud. All right, so that was a lot of numbers. What does that mean for you? Well, you get the oil cooler priority of the aftermarket shroud with the engine priority of the OEM shroud smashed into one with even more airflow on top of that. So no matter what you're looking for, this is the best way to move forward. One of the specific use cases for this fan is if you're running a 5th gear or a freeway flyer gear where you're running sustained speeds at lower RPMs. This, in fact, lowers your fan speed, which means you're producing less air. So the velocity stack will help increase the air that the fan is able to generate while the fins inside are able to help spread that air with the least amount of resistance possible. So when you're running at lower RPMs with sustained load, you can stay cool the whole time. So after all that, why settle for anything less? Contact your local EMPI dealer and get to a Doghouse fan shroud today.